Welcome back to the Imperial podcast.
The podcast where we talk about imperialism from the views of the imperialized country's perspective. And today's topic is the U.S. and Panama.
As some of you may know, during the late 1800s, the U.S. decided they wanted to dip their big capitalist toes in imperialism.
Now, at the time, most of their imperialism was centered on the South America and island nations near the U.S. And they decided to come down to good old Panama.
The reason for the U.S.'s desire to claim Panama was to build a canal through our country which would open trade and allow them to better protect their military bases in the region.
The economic benefits seemed pretty nice, and we would have accepted it, but Colombia stood in our way.
Exactly, as to the chagrin of the Americans, Colombia, the people who owned us at the time, said no, as Panama was far too valuable to them and they did not want to share.
Colombia saw it as an attack on their sovereignty, and they didn't think the U.S. was offering enough.
Now, at the time, our people were getting pretty sick of Colombia's cruelty and exploitation, and our country began rebelling against them as a result. There were a few failed attempts as the Colombians were far better armed than us, but in 1903, our country Panama tried again, and with U.S. naval intervention, they won.
Next time Americans came down to our country, they proposed the same thing, saying, "Yo, we want to build a canal." And they told our ancestors about the economic benefits to it. And our country was like, "Okay, bet, let's do this, but don't be involved with our business."
After the revolution, the extremely successful revolution, might I add, construction began in earnest with the aptly named Panama Canal Company, because goodness forbid they be creative with their names.
That's an interesting take, bro. It would take the company 10 years and over 400,000 men to complete the canal.
So, in 1914, the canal opened and trade boomed. But I would like to add that despite being in our country, the canal was owned by the U.S. and would remain that way for most of the 20th century.
At the time, everything was going swell until the U.S. took their greasy fingers and started interfering with our country's sovereignty and the way our government worked in the 1970s through the 80s.
The interference put a strain on relations with our nation along with many other South American nations.
The handing over of the canal in 1999 filled most of us with pride, and the partnership with the U.S. was seen as positive to most of us.
Due to the massive economic benefits that we and the U.S. gained, our relationship with them has remained mostly positive, despite several ups and downs towards the end of the last century.
In the end, it was overall beneficial for both sides, and the canal is still used to this day.
Well, folks, that's about all we have time for today. This has been the Imperial Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.